Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Ned Bellavance, Ned1313 on Twitter, and welcome to the Daily Check-in for September 10th, September 10th, 2020. And today's topic is going to be part two, excuse me, part two of installing K3s on a Raspberry Pi. And this time we're expanding our horizons a little bit. We are going to be a Raspberry looking to deploy multiple K3s instances in a cluster, a master cluster on our Raspberry Pi. So I have 3 Raspberry Pis allocated to do that. We're going to walk through that process of how do you get the first one running, and then how do you add additional members to that cluster. We'll see how we actually do that. We'll query the cluster, and then we'll kind of see what's running in the background. So that's the plan. We'll see how far we get in the time allotted. I don't really have any housekeeping items. You may notice that the camera's a little bit different. I actually had to detach my usual mirrorless A5100 because I'm going to be using that for a presentation later today. And so I'm falling back to my Logitech Brio 4K, which I actually think might be a better picture. So I'm going to have to weigh the pros and cons here and see which one I end up liking better. Maybe I end up liking this Logitech one a little bit more from an image standpoint. So let me know what you think. If you see a difference, if it's worthwhile. If it looks like I'm looking at the wrong camera sometimes, it's because I'm used to looking at the mirrorless and not at the Logitech. So I'm like confusing myself, right? Don't have any housekeeping items. I just want to check in with you, see how you doing. How's it going? Welcome to Thursday. I hope it's been a good Thursday so far. It is it's unbelievably humid around here. If I could describe it in one word, I went out for a run around 10 o'clock today and it was 75, but it felt like 90 because of the humidity. But at least the skies are the right colors. So, I mean, if you're living out in the San Francisco Bay Area, you had a weird day yesterday. So I hope you've recovered from that if that was your situation. It's a strange time to be alive, and we're all getting through it together, right? So let's get into this K3s thing, and we'll dive right into it. So let me get over to my screen. All right, so I've got Visual Studio Code up and running here, and let me first show you what's going on. So if I go into SSH down in the bottom, I'm already remoted into one of the Raspberry Pis. This is the first one, the initial one that I set up. And what I did to get this running is I already had, if you watched the first video, I went through this initial setup script that basically enables SSH, sets the proper host name, sets the proper IP address, adds some stuff in the host file so I can use names if I want, adds the proper command line arguments to enable C groups and C group memory, because you need that in order for this all to work, and turning on legacy IP tables because that's used by K3s. So that is all to get the Raspberry Pi ready to go. And I did that on each one. And so I've got 1.31, 1.32, and 1.33. Those are my Raspberry Pi IP addresses. Okay. If I go over to the install K3s server, you can ignore these first two, or actually these first two. The first thing I did was get the most recent K3s binary. So I checked, and the most recent is 1.19.1. So I went on the website and I checked to see what the most recent release, and this is not the most recent stable release. This is just the most recent release. And I did that for a reason, because when I went to go look at the documentation, and let me see if I can bring that documentation up, because it's interesting. There we go. You'll see that running high availability with an embedded database, it's always been an experimental feature. But one of the interesting things about it is, as of 1.19, they've moved it from embedded DQ Lite to embedded etcd. And I figure if I'm going to be doing this and doing this going forward, I might as well use, I'm already in an experimental feature, I might as well use the build that uses the newest thing, right? So instead of using DQ Lite, we're now using etcd as the shared embedded database for the cluster. So that's the idea behind that. Okay, so that's the version that I'm grabbing. And all we're doing is downloading it as K3s, making it executable, and throwing it in user bin so that it's in the path and we can just invoke it. And then the instructions are to run it as root. Now, this is if you're doing it just through the command line. If you were setting this up as a service, and that's going to be a future video, is getting this all set up to run as a service. you don't have to muck around with this portion of it. But just to get it up as sort of a proof of concept, I switched to root and then I set a token value. This token value here is going to be shared amongst the cluster. It's how additional servers are going to join the cluster to create that embedded, shared, highly available cluster that we're trying to create. So by setting the token, and then the actual command is going to be K3s server. So we're setting up a server, not an agent, and we're doing -- cluster init. And this is what initializes it as a cluster. And since there's no other arguments, it's going to use that etcd embedded database for its shared database across the cluster nodes. And you'll notice that I'm setting the environment variable K3s token to my token value. In that way, it has a value that I can use to set up my additional servers. So I already ran that on number 1. And then to set up the first of the 2 additional nodes, I ran the export token and then this command here, which is K3s token. So I set the token so it knows the token to join the cluster, K3s server, and then I'm telling it go contact the server that's at this IP address and join the cluster. So I already did that on K3s2. And if we go over here, we're going to go ahead and SSH into K3s3. There we go. Type in my password. Awesome. All right. So I have not yet gotten the binary. So we're going to go through this whole process here. First, we'll get the binary. And then once that's downloaded, it's pretty small. It's like 40 meg or something. So this goes by fairly quickly. All right, so once that's done downloading, we can set it as executable and move it to where we want it. We can do K3s, I think it's either -v or version. -v, I got it right the first time. Tells us we're running 1.19, and this is the correct version for this operating system type. All right, so we're gonna switch to operating as root for this, and we'll export our token into the environment variable token, and then we'll specify that along with this entire argument, and it should reach out to .31 and join the cluster, and then I will have 3 participating nodes within the cluster. All right, awesome. So let's just give this a moment to bake in. Oh no! Start cluster, join etcd cluster, too many learner members in cluster. Well, I did say that this is an experimental feature, so it's interesting that I was able to join the first one, no big deal, and it actually shows that here. Here's that first cluster member, here's that second cluster member, and then when I tried to add the third cluster member, it did not like that at all. Okay, that's interesting. So that's something, obviously, I'm going to have to troubleshoot because I tried to do this live, and that's the way that live demos are. So why don't we drop out of this SSH session and let's jump onto 31, which is the original master that I set up. And I should be able to, if I switch to root, I should be able to do K3s kubectl get nodes. And it should show me at least the first 2 nodes. Oh, so it doesn't even show me the second node. Right now, the only node that it's aware of is the node that it's currently running on. And that's got the role of etcd and master. So it looks like there's still some stuff here that needs to be uncovered for this to function appropriately. And just, going by what the docs say is not going to be quite enough to get this whole thing up and running. Some interesting homework for me to go back on is to look at what's going on K3s1 and also look at the logs on K3s2 and see if there's communication issues, if for some reason it's not able to, well, it was obviously able to join the etcd. So the real question is, why is it not able to show up as another master? Or is it the situation where only one master can be active at a time? We could do something like jump over to our first SSH session, and I'm just going to break things now because it's fun. I'm going to kill this server, which means that this one should notice that it went down and promote itself. Let's see if it does that. So it's doing a health check. It could not connect, refused, reconnecting, could not connect, refuse. Let's go over to this section, and we are going to not exit out of here. We can connect into this one, into 32. Let's see what happens here. So if I do switch to root, and if I do K3s cube CTL, get nodes, connection refused. Did I specify that? Okay, so obviously this stuff is not working. I've got some homework to do. So I hope this was interesting to you to watch me epically fail at creating this cluster. Always fun, always interesting to try to live stream a demo that you haven't checked fully out before. But this is, this stuff you run into. You think it's all configured properly, and then you discover you missed something. So obviously something's going on here beyond the fact that it's an experimental feature. So maybe I need to take a step back and try to build just a regular cluster without the embedded database, see if I can get that working, and then try to layer back in the embedded database. Baby steps. I reached for the moon, or actually I reached for the stars, and I didn't even make it to the moon. So that will be next week, is me trying to figure this out. Tomorrow is Friday, so it's all about HashiCorp Vault. I'm going to be talking about Objective 6, I believe, which is all about the Vault CLI. This will be part 2 of that. So if that's of interest, tune in tomorrow. Until then, stay healthy and stay safe, everybody. Thank you.